Hey guys, welcome to the Neglected Podcast. This podcast is not to change your mind, but to invite you into somebody else's narrative. This is a podcast to give a voice to the neglected. It is also an opportunity for all of us to engage.
Hi, Neglected Podcast listeners. This is your host, Jovanna, and I am here in the studio with Quinn. Say hello, Quinn. And we are at City Church, and we have a special guest on, and today we're doing something new. We have a virtual guest, and so we have Shelby virtually coming in. Say hi.
Hello.
Hi, and so I'm excited for two reasons. One, you sent an email to the Neglected Podcast about your story, and so I'm really excited to talk to you and dig into that. But two, you're our beta test for virtual. We've never done this before, and we're really hoping if this goes well, we're kind of learning on you. But if this goes well, this really opens up an opportunity for us to be able to get more stories and share more stories. So thank you so much for agreeing to share your story, but also thank you for agreeing to be our beta test.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, great. So I want to go ahead and just dive in and hear a little bit about you. So tell me where you're from and what you do.
Well, my name is Shelby, obviously, and I am married and I have 4 kiddos. I am residing in Florida right now, and I'm a legal assistant, prior military, so a veteran, and pursuing my education in human services, hopefully to incorporate the nonprofit that I want to do shortly.
Well, great. And so you did include that you're hoping to open a nonprofit for young women in foster care. But you also included some aspects of your story. So I would love to hear from you on where you're from and where you grew up.
So originally we grew up down in South Florida. It's Davie, Florida. It's a little tiny. It's an older town down there. And I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And we just grew up down there with both of our parents while we were obviously with them.
And so what was growing up like for you down in this town with your siblings, and you had both of your parents at the time? So what was growing up like for you?
Growing up was different for me. I actually didn't have much of a childhood. My parents had a very unhealthy relationship. Both of them had their own habits, and bringing that together into one household, it didn't work. So my childhood really revolved around DCF being involved a lot. And I pretty much raised my brother and sister through most of it, and I took care of them. So when it comes down to much of my childhood, I just remember like a revolving door of different people coming in and out, and even just people coming to get our furniture if we didn't make a payment, or notices on our house because we weren't able to make certain payments, things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so for you as a kid growing up with, one, you have a lot of responsibility. You're raising your siblings, but then also having people in and out. What was that like for you? Like, do you remember what you thought of that when you were younger?
I mean, unfortunately for me, it became kind of normal. That's kind of what I had always known. And most nights, my dad was a drinker. So most nights were just kind of sitting behind the couch with my brother and sister and waiting for the storm to pass, So for us, for me, I just remember always having to okay, what's next? Kind of wait for the next thing to happen and just kind of go with it and ensure that my brother and sister were safe. I really don't remember much of a time where I wasn't just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah. No, and so at this point, I mean, are you going to school? How's this impacting your school life and your social life as a kid?
Unfortunately, with the type of family dynamic that we had, there'd be highs and then there'd be lows. So, I can recall joining a softball team, I don't recall how long that lasted. I remember having like 2 friends, really one back then.
Yeah.
And even then, they kind of knew something was up. So I had to always go over to her house. And then school was hard. I always had a hard time in school because I never did tutoring. I never had that extra attention. I had extra time on tests because obviously I wasn't getting that extra time at home. School just kind of became like the place where I just maintained. I got C's, I kind of just floated through, but I never really had the time to dedicate any of my attention to it.
Yeah. And did you feel like you were different when you were in school? Like, did it feel different that, like, were you aware that, like, you're a young child raising your siblings? Were you aware of, like, that stark difference?
The weird thing is now as an adult, I can see it now having children of my own. Other kids, I really was just always in my own head. I was always just focused on, all right, get this done. What do I have to do when I get home? How's the night going to go? So I've always just been kind of trapped in my head. And even as a little kid, it wasn't something where I was like, oh yeah, like I don't have anything to worry about. Like mom and dad will pick me up today. And, it was just more just kind of sail through, get what I have to done, and see what happens next.
Yeah. And so I think what's so fascinating about what you're saying is it's almost like at such a young age, there was this sense of responsibility that just flipped in you that was like, this is what I do now. Almost, and it sounds like you didn't really question it much. It was just, this is what I'm supposed to do now. I need to be worried about nighttime. I need to worry about what my siblings need. And of course you just were coasting through school because that was probably just an afterthought because of all the other things that you had going on in your head. So I think that's really interesting that for you that switch kind of flipped of like, okay, I'm responsible now. This is what I do now.
Yeah, and it's actually funny because, later on in the story we'll learn more, but for me, surviving is easy. Like surviving I can do. I know how to get through, trials, I can get through anything, but like living is really hard. Like just letting go and just enjoying life, that's something that I'm learning.
Yeah.
Because I never had that experience. I was always having to be in survival mode. So.
Yeah. No, and that's a lot of responsibility. And so you mentioned that there were agencies involved and in and out of your house. What was their role? So were they coming because they needed to check on you, or were they coming and you were being removed from your parents' care?
Well, there was kind of like a phase where that all changed. When we were down in South Florida, a lot of it was more check-ins. They were getting cases reported to them and they'd come in. And it was a different kind of care that we received in South Florida. And, we'd have the social workers come in and talk to us in our bedrooms. And then I remember getting in trouble afterwards because my parents could come in and they'd be like, well, why did you say this? And,
Yeah.
So it kind of created this wall where we really didn't want to talk to anybody about everything. And then we relocated to Gainesville, Florida. And that's when DCF actually got involved and took us away.
Yeah. How old were you when that happened?
I was 11 at that time. And I just remember showing up after school and law enforcement being there. We walked from our bus stop into our house was at the time. And there were so many people there. I mean, law enforcement, DFACs, so many people. I couldn't even remember how many. And they're asking us all these questions. The next thing you know, it's like, here's a trash bag, pick up everything that you have, and let's go. I mean, it was just so fast.
Yeah. And so that's a whirlwind. So you're 11. And what happens next? So you're 11, you're told, you see all these people at your home, told to pack up your things. And so what happened next for you?
My mom took care of us for some time after that, after they found, that she could possibly take care of us. Unfortunately for her, it was really hard. Being in that relationship with my dad was really toxic for her. And, it caused a lot of concerns for her. And at that time, there'd be days where I'd be at home with my brother and sister and be taking care of them. I mean, full on feeding them bacon. I used to like cook bacon in the mornings and send them to school. You know, I had no idea what to do, and I would cook them whatever I could find in the pantry and take them and put them in bed and then go off to school the next day. So eventually it kind of got reported, and that's when we were actually placed into foster care.
Yeah. And so when you were placed into foster care, were you and your siblings together?
Yes. So at first they were really concerned because it is very hard. And at that time, me and my sister and brother, we were labeled as children in foster care who have been sexually abused. And when you have that label, the odds of finding a placement are extremely rare and hard. So they were having a difficult time. I mean, they literally were like, we're going to have to split you guys up. And we didn't have family. So we had to find somebody in the community who could take us in. And at that time, we did find someone who was able to take all three of us in. And we resided there for about a year. And it wasn't a healthy environment for the three of us as well. And they they wanted to find a placement for us, but they couldn't. At that time, I was about 15. And my brother, sister, and I, it was hard on all of them. And I saw that. So I decided, after speaking with my social worker, who was amazing, I love her. I actually still have contact with her today. And I told her I wanted to be emancipated. So at 15 is when I got emancipated, with hopes that I could take my brother and sister, or that they could find a better placement together, because nobody wanted a 15-year-old. It's so hard, a 15, a 13, an 11-year-old. It was nearly impossible. So I wanted what was best for them. And I made the decision to get emancipated and become an adult so that they could find a better placement.
Yeah. And so even as you were sharing, the thing that was going through my head is, wow, like that's so much to carry. And so at this time, you like these things are happening at such like big points in development, right? And so when you look back, or even just as you think about it, how did that affect how you felt about you? I mean, you're being taken from your parents, and it's really hard to find a placement for you. You have this label that makes it harder. And then you're making this choice to emancipate yourself so that you can possibly, take care of yourself, but then also trying to make a decision for your siblings. And at 15, when I'm sure 15-year-olds now, it's like, man, I can't imagine the 15-year-olds I know thinking about that. And I wouldn't, that shouldn't be what they're thinking about. And so how did you feel about yourself? Or
when I look back, I really just didn't know what else to do. I mean, like I said, surviving is easy, and it was another step towards survival. And in my head, there's this little girl, and she's trapped in a room. And in that room is like a bookshelf, and it just has all these little things that are trapped in it, and it's like joyful things that a child should have experienced. And for me, she's just sitting in there waiting, because I've always had to kind of be the adult and take care of things. So she just sits there.
Yeah. So you didn't have the permission to just be. So at this point, perseverance has kicked in, survival has kicked in, and it's been in overdrive for years. And so there weren't many moments where you could sit and be like, how do I feel about this? Do I feel sad? Do I feel angry? It's no, what needs to be done next.
Yeah, most definitely. I don't recall processing emotions or feelings, and to this day, it's something that I'm working on.
And so when you got emancipated, and could you give a brief description of what that means if someone has never heard of emancipation, or if they've never met anybody who is emancipated?
Well, for me, my experience of being emancipated, it just means that you are an adult. You pretty much no longer, are seen as a child. You have bills to pay, you have rent to pay, you have to, collect the money and make those things happen. And you no longer have a support system where you're viewed as a child. You are now seen as an adult on all levels.
Okay. And so at 15 you were an adult, and were you still going to school at that time?
I was. So when this all first happened, I was trying to travel from the city to my small town high school, and it was about a 45-minute drive. And it was difficult, and I also had to have a job. So I was going to school, and then I was working so that I could pay for my rent. And I ended up dropping out. So I never had my senior year. I never, did any of those things that you do as a senior. And I lived right across from a Hungry Howie's. And I used to just, I'd work and I'd buy my $5 pizza, and I would eat that for 3 days, go back and get another $5 pizza. And that's kind of how I lived. I woke up, went to work, worked my day, and then I went back to my little studio apartment, and I had like a little box TV with one movie, which was Superman. Yeah. And that's just how my days went.
Yeah. And so at that point, you're still in survival mode. So you're just working, pay bills, feed my body, repeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so how long were you kind of in that space of working and living on your own?
Well, until I met my now ex-husband at the time. He was also former foster care. And we kind of I think we found that connection because we both understood the system and we've both been through it. And when I met him, I just, I kind of was like, okay, like this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to have a relationship, and, what's the next thing? We moved in together, and then not too long after we had moved in together, I got pregnant with my daughter. So yeah, I went from teens to more of an adult.
Yeah. So
than what I had already been.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got pregnant with your first daughter?
I was 19.
Okay. So at 19, and there does seem to be almost this thread of responsibility. So it doesn't sound like, was that a moment of like, oh my goodness, I'm about to have a baby? Or did survival still just kind of kick in and was like, we have a baby now. Like, we take care of this baby. Okay.
Yeah, I was just survival. Like, okay, I'm having a baby. What do I do next? And it's just funny because when I look back now compared to when I had her, my first, to my fourth child, I'm like, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I was just survival mode. Like, okay, she eats, she sleeps, you change her, and like that just kind of, I was like, okay, keep her alive at the end of the day. I'm doing a great job.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I actually found a wonderful job with DCF in Gainesville, working for child abuse and neglect. So I ended up having a wonderful network of people around me who understood my situation, and they threw me a baby shower.
That's sweet.
So I did end up, it's interesting how even though I was going through foster care and all of this, I've made some amazing connections with people within the foster care system, getting the opportunity to work there. That opportunity was only because I was in foster care.
Yeah. So what was that experience like for you working in the system, and like the system that you kind of were in, but then now you're working in it? What was that experience like?
I loved it. That's where I found my passion for wanting to help others. And it really drove me to continue my education, because I just felt like there's so much that is said about those who work within DCF,
Yeah.
And honestly, most of the people that I met, they wanted the best. And I just seeing it and being able to help those kids. And it was kind of like I got to be this warrior now. I was like, okay, I go in, like these kids have been through these things. And I just felt like I could relate. And then, I felt like I was helping in some way.
Yeah. So you're working this job, and then you said that you've got the support network. And so with the support network, was it difficult to receive help? Because, I mean, it sounds like for so long you were in survival mode and on your own and in charge of everything. So was that something that also you needed to learn how to do, is accept help and accept people like stepping in for you?
Oh yeah, it was hard, but it's kind of like that environment and those people, those key people. There was no way. They were like, no, like we're helping you out. We got you, and they just, and I to this day, I don't like gifts, but
Yeah.
they were like, oh, well, like, come on, we're going down here. And then, there's a room full of baby stuff. I mean, I didn't have to buy her anything when I had her. And, even after I had her, there were days where, she might have had a cold or I couldn't take her to daycare.
Mm-hmm.
And she was right there at work in my office with me, and they take turns, hanging out with her. So it was really a great system. I'm really fortunate for that opportunity.
Yeah, no, and I love that for you, that like in this space, not only are you surrounded by people who genuinely care about you, you're surrounded by people who understand. So who understand why you might be pushing away and saying no, 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 because they understand the survival, they understand the perseverance, and are willing to kind of break through. And so that's amazing. I love that you had that. So you're working, you're raising your daughter, you're married, and did you decide to go back and get like a GED or go back to school at that point, or was that later on?
No, actually, I did forget this part. I was getting my GED when I was working. I was doing the night GED courses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did those after work. And then I'll never forget this. I took my test, and it's like a whole day. It's like this, you're so nervous. And then you have to wait for it to come in the mail to let you know, like, if you passed. And I'll never forget, like, I go check the mail, and I had the certificate, and my score was so high that they actually gave me a high school diploma. So I was just like, okay, I graduated like 6 months before my peers.
Yay, congrats. Yeah. That's awesome. And so
Yeah.
you end up doing that. So things are moving along. So how are things moving for you as you're raising your daughter and working full time and you're working in your passion?
Yeah. So my husband at that time, he developed some really unhealthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately that cycle of abuse, it kind of came around. And it was putting my daughter at risk. He was doing risky behavior, trying to just fulfill his needs that were really unhealthy for him. And for the longest, I had that hope, I'd been through the same stuff. I understand, and I kept hoping and trying to see that there'd be change. But you can't change people. You can't, they have to do it. And eventually I had became in survival mode with that as well. In my own home, I had to be on guard. I had to, watch everything and question myself. Unfortunately, it became a relationship where he was extremely abusive, sexually, emotionally, and a narcissist. So I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so he joined the military.
Mm-hmm.
And when he joined the military, they were like, it's all going to change. Everything's going to be better. And it didn't. It didn't get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you brought up that survival mode kicks in, and survival mode's in your home. And now, like, you're holding out for hope. He joins the military. Things still don't change. And so what's the turning point for you where you recognize that things probably aren't going to change and I need to protect myself and my child?
Well, I had seen it coming, and the abuse had gotten worse. And I got pregnant with my second child. And I remember, like, in my head, I was already trying to plan my escape plan. And I remember sitting in the bathtub for an hour just crying. I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm trying so hard. It's one thing when you have one kid.
Mm-hmm.
I have another child. What do I do? So I just, put my big girl pants on, and I said, all right, well, let's just get through, see how it goes. But what was my big turning point, and at this time Addison was 3, was one night I'm crying.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks at me and she says, Mommy, why are you crying? Are you crying because of Daddy?
Yeah.
And when she said that, that was the turning point. I mean, like right there, I was like, if my daughter's connecting me hurting and me crying, I have to get away. Like, because I'm creating the same culture that I grew up in for my daughter. So she saved me.
Yeah.
That moment right there changed my life.
Yeah.
So.
No, and that is so hard. And that's something that's really complex, because if you've never been in an abusive relationship or learned about abusive relationships, it can be very hard to understand of like, why don't people leave? But it is so complicated and it's a lot. And what I love about what you said is that you had that aha moment, that your daughter saying that to you was almost like that switch in which you were like, I don't want her to experience what I've experienced. And so I'm proud of you for leaving, even though I didn't know you then, but that is hard. I mean, that's super difficult. And so you put an escape plan in action, but you have a 3-year-old and you're pregnant. Yeah.
Well, and at this time, my son was like a brand new baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no other options. He would say, no one's going to give you the kids. You have a GED, like you don't have college, and I'm in the military. Yeah. So of course they're going to give the kids to me. So I decided I was going to join the military. I said, all right, well, if you're going to use that, I'm going to join. Mm-hmm. And I joined the military pretty much to run away, which there's a lot of people who do that. Yeah. And it was that was really the driving force. I mean, I'd never in my life think that I joined the military. I mean, you could have asked my friends. Yeah. They were like, joined in the military. Like, they didn't believe me. They're like, no, she's not really going to do it. And then when I left for basic training, they're like, oh, she really did.
She joined the military. Yeah. So which branch did you join?
I joined the Army.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you go through basic.
Yep. And, oh gosh, good times. And that's where I learned more about religion. Because in my life, I was raised Catholic, but I really veered off of that. And then when I was in the abusive relationship, I mean, I would cry, I would pray. I'd be like, just please, like, let law enforcement get involved, help me, rescue me in some way. And it didn't happen. So there was really this strained relationship. And then in basic training, I mean, they pretty much said, you go to church or you clean. So at 6:30 in the morning, I was like, well, which one do I want to do on a Sunday? So that motivated me to go to church. And, that's towards the end of basic training, I got baptized. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what was that moment for you where it connected, where faith like connected for you?
Just hearing that I'm forgiven, the things that I've been through, and that it's okay, that, like I said, I'm forgiven and I've done things, but at the end of the day, there's a place for me. And one day there'll be a home that I don't have to have any worries or stress or anything. So just having that comfort.
Yeah. So that sense of like truly belonging and truly being seen. Yeah. So at the end of basic, we've grown in so many ways at that point for you. And when you get out of basic, where do you get stationed?
So after basic training, I went to AIT. I learned my job. And then I ended up getting stationed in Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia. Okay.
And so you and your kids move here into Savannah. Okay. And how was your time in the military? What was that like for you?
It was good. I think I was a little naive. because, I was like, oh, we're all brothers and sisters, and I guess I like let this caution that I usually carry, I kind of let it down. And unfortunately, military sexual abuse and trauma is very relevant within all branches of the military. So I did experience some of that, but I was able to, get that situation handled. So besides that, I love the military. I met some amazing people. I met people who today, I still can call up and they're right there for me. So I did enjoy my experience.
Yeah. So you end up gaining a support network. And even though there was some trauma that happened while you were in the military, you were able to, it sounds like, report it and get it handled. And it sounds like maybe even handled correctly.
Yeah, which is great.
No, that's good. I'm glad that happened for you. And so while in the military, when did you get out?
Well, I was actually in the military for 5 years. And while I was in, I met my husband now. And we also had 2 more kids. So I got out, October of 2019.
Yeah, so you got out in October 2019. So at what point, though, so we're closer to almost now. So that's 2 years away from, or backwards. And so it sounds like you were in survival mode for so long. You join the military and you have this turning point of belonging. And you mentioned that you're still kind of working through like being present and living. At what point does that turn for you that you recognize that like, wow, like I don't always have to be in survival mode and it's okay to just be?
Well, it's interesting because, I met my husband who I was like, I just never thought I would meet somebody like him. So I was like, this is great, like it's okay. There's healthy relationships. I thought he was strange because he was nice. He was like normal, the things that you're supposed to experience in a relationship. To me, I was like, there's something off about you. So I was able to really like let my guard down and start to just live life during that time, and the only thing is that not long after our relationship, his son had passed away, and that put me in a hole. That kind of made me feel like, wow, I got comfortable. I started living life. I was just in this like, it's okay mode. I let all my guards down, and then something like that happens. And I'm like, all right, that's normal. That is Shelby's life right there. That's exactly what we're used to. And that's just how it goes. So that was a turning point for where I kind of went back into that cycle of, survival and worry and anxiety and constantly having to be on guard. So my turning point of getting out of that has honestly been this last year. Yeah. And it's crazy because it's like I'm almost 30 and now I'm learning skills in a way to like enjoy, everything. But it's still a lot of work. It is true.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's such a huge amount of work because our brains are kind of designed to be efficient. So they do what they need to do for us to survive or for us to make it. So if we have more of a relaxed and chill environment, then like that part of your brain that's in charge of like fighting is not as big. And so for you, like there became this moment where it's like, if you relax, bad things will happen. But if you're always on guard, you don't have to be ready if you're always ready. And so that can take a while to undo, especially with how long you've needed that. And like to lay that down is huge. And so, yeah, great for you to lay that down because it would, as weird as it might sound to some people, I completely get how survival mode can be almost like a comfort because it's familiar. Like, I know what to do here. When there's nothing, like, what do you do? Do you like lay down? Like, what do you do when it's quiet?
Well, that is me to a T. I mean, like, my husband's like, I thought you were going to relax today. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's just, I have to constantly be ready or doing something. If it's too quiet, then something's wrong.
Yeah. No, so you said in this last year, that's been the moment of really like unpacking those things and working through those things. And so the other thing that you mentioned that I thought was great that ties in is you hope to build a nonprofit. And so what is your hope with the nonprofit that you one day might establish?
Oh yeah. So I pretty much have everything ready. It's just getting the proper funding and wanting to do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called True Girls Incorporated, and we serve girls from 13 to 23, and we want to help them to be courageous, confident, and connected. So, the whole aspect and point of the organization is to just give those girls a support system, to be there, help them get their GED. If they're becoming young parents, being there, explaining how everything works. And just the biggest thing is connection. Yeah. Because I didn't have that. Everything that I did, I had to build that. I had to work for it. And I feel like with True Girls Incorporated, we can help those girls to build resumes, network within the community, have people who are there for them. And we also are going to have a 24-hour safe place to where they can come. Human trafficking is such a big deal, especially within foster girls. I mean, foster boys and girls. But, I mean, there's just such a high rate of it happening. It's actually proven that about 63% of human trafficked children were in foster care at one point in their lives. Yeah. So it's just, to me, I want to create that safe place, that network, and that place to really help the girls become future leaders, because I've seen so many people, so many women, so many ladies who have gone through the same walks of life, and it's hard. I mean, some of them, have left. Some of them have committed suicide. Some of them are in hospitals, or just they've repeated that cycle. So I want to be there for all of the girls.
No, I love that, because I think that can be something that those of us who have not experienced foster care or been in the lives of someone in foster care, that we miss, of connections aren't naturally there, because there is so much. Just even listening to your story, there's people in and out. I'm with my mom and dad, now I'm not. I'm with my mom, now I'm not. I'm with this new family, and either it's a good fit or it's not. And there's so much happening to youth in foster care that they're not having that moment to just be a kid or to just connect, because is there time to connect when I'm just thinking about survival? And so I love that with your idea, because based off of what you've experienced with what you're building, I'm here. I'm going to come to you. And so I love that, because that is something that I love about people using their stories to build something, or using their stories to make a change, is that you have a perspective on this that I don't have. Like, even though I'm a counselor and I can read all the books and I can relate to people and listen to their stories, there's an aspect of things that are going to hit you completely different. There's going to be things that you notice. And so that's what I love so much about hearing your story. And then what you're talking about now with this nonprofit is being able to connect with people, because even when you were in school, it sounds like there was probably people reporting, but it doesn't sound like you were that different to where people would have noticed that, like, maybe she needs like me to step in and mentor her. So I love that.
Yeah, most definitely. And at that time, I didn't think to ask, I didn't know. And it's funny because we relocated to Florida for my husband's family and to have that support system. But I'm learning so much. Like, sometimes I'll be like, do you know how to do this? I'm like, I have no idea. I've never done this, Yeah. Things as, simple as I had to learn how to cook, which that was fun. But, just offering programs where we can teach them to cook, or any type of thing. So, and just to have that, because you miss out on that a lot. When you're in foster care, it's just more so like you have a placement, this is your temporary home. But I wanted to provide, no matter how many places you go, we're here for you, so.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. And my prayer is that, you'll be able to get that off the ground, because you said that you were already there. It's just you wanted to establish it the right way. So my prayer is that you'll be able to establish it the right way, and that it will have like a firm foundation, because that's so needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so I really appreciate you coming in and sharing and being our beta tester. And we talked about on the phone yesterday about how we end our podcast each time with asking our listeners asking our guests to give a challenge for our listeners. So what would your challenge be?
My challenge is called Stand True. And I'm just going to ask everybody to stand true and confident in your story. No matter what your story is, just, share that. Be confident and use it to motivate yourself to just push forward. I just think that everybody has such different walks of life and experiences that maybe if we shared them more and we were confident in them more people could have a better understanding. So that's what I challenge people to just be open and honest about it.
And I love that so much. And you displayed Stand True perfectly today. Thank you so much for being so transparent and sharing. I really hope that this impacts people. And I hope that if there's someone who's experienced anything that you've experienced will hear your story and have hope and know that they're not alone. And so I so appreciate you sharing. Thank you for that challenge. That was amazing.
Aw, yes, you're welcome. I appreciate you guys giving me this platform to even, share my story, because I've always wanted to help others and let people know that, who knows, I could be reaching out to somebody in foster care right now who just doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's what I want to do.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Shelby, and we'll catch you next time, listeners. Bye.